And I'll join palms. And repeat after me. Take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. In the palms join. Palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here today, and happy Pride, and grateful to those of you who had the courage to come into the neighborhood this morning through 150,000 people out there. So glad you're here. I was there at 9:45 this morning, and it was already 9:30, 9:20, and it was already it was quite fun before all the other fun even started. So glad you're all here. Hope you didn't pay too much for parking somewhere down the street. Actually, I should announce, Meredith, I just found out that Bernie is actually letting people park. You just have to pay. They're doing it as a fundraiser.
It's great. I parked in Madison and Texas.
Okay, so we have a group here that's finishing up at 2 o'clock, and we almost canceled it because we weren't sure how everybody would get here and park. But now that I know that, maybe we can remind each other.
They were looking pretty full when I drove by.
Okay.
And then I was just like, forget it. I just went that way.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll figure something out. But glad you're all here. And to those of you joining virtually, because you didn't have any courage whatsoever to come here, thanks for joining us virtually. Yeah, so how's everybody? Nice small crowd today. Anything anyone wants to share? How y'all feeling right about now? Say again?
Lovely.
Lovely? Great. What else? Grateful? What else? Anything? I see you two moved up to the front row since there's nobody else.
Well, $20 a seat.
Yes. And they get more expensive as you sit closer. You know, imagine what these two are paying for these seats. Yes. Any thoughts in anybody's mind that they want to share while we're sitting here?
This is my first time here.
Say again?
This is my first time here.
First time here. Nice. Well, welcome. What's your name?
Senya.
Senya. That's why you're sitting in the back right by the door. Yeah.
Real quietly.
Right on. Well, glad you're here. Yeah. Not that it matters, but we're usually quite packed here, and it's nice to sit with a few people. This reminds me a little bit of, during the pandemic, we were shut down 16, 18 months. And so when we transitioned everything virtual, I would sit here, do my 2 classes a week, exact same setup, camera, and nobody here. And so when I would do my offering, and I would ask everybody to join palms, and I would say, I take refuge in the Buddha, and then I would wait for people to respond, but there was nobody here. And I did it just knowing that maybe people at home were doing it, so I would have to hear it in my head. And then I would continue, and then I would sit down and I would talk, and I would literally go around the room, and a lot of the kind of the regulars, people we've seen for so many years, you all have your favorite seats. And so as I went around the room, literally chair to chair, pew to pew, making eye contact with nobody. But in my head and in my heart, I imagined that a lot of these people that we've known for so long were actually still sitting there. And it was just one little way to keep me extra motivated and inspired, because after a year and a half of talking to just like this little tiny camera, that's really difficult. And I did all kinds of things, like imagining there were like little people in that little screen right there, jumping out and jumping up and saying hello. And so, and then when we reopened and people trickled back in slowly, nobody was sure if they wanted to go anywhere yet. And all the chaos and confusion around should I or shouldn't I wear a mask, and all the division and hatred that came from that for ridiculous reasons. So I just had kind of flashbacks of all of that as we were just restarting. So I'm thrilled to see that this is a completely different time under completely different conditions. And as I wrote in a post this morning to the group coming today at 2, as you're driving around and, frustrated or annoyed that you can't park somewhere, just recognize that the reason that you can't park anywhere is because there's a couple 100,000 people 3 blocks from here coming together to celebrate the beauty and joy of the LGBTQ community. And that because of that condition, we don't have anywhere to park. And I think that's a really beautiful thing and a way to remind ourselves that this is really important. So, so with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin, for those who may be new. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? You're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to, if you're on a cushion, often helps line to the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees and the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on a chair or bench, however you're sitting, just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders as well. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. . Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing the sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Turn attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. The mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Slowly open the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. Most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. Nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. It means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. That means very simply for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. A mind that's steady, clear, focused. Distracted by nothing. Disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape. It is direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment, as we know, is very often filled with conflict, difficulty, challenges. And so this practice is learning to be with those as they arise. Being aware of what we think, what we say, and what we do at each moment. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, and learning to be kind to yourself and everybody you encounter every moment of your life. That's it. We spend so much time trying to change, fix, control those around us. And this practice is setting that down and learning to change what we do. That's hard enough. To be mindful and aware and make changes with what we think, say, and do for ourselves. It's incredibly difficult. And for some reason, we roam around so much of our day thinking that we're going to change what other people think and say and do. And it doesn't mean you stop trying. If the intention is pure. But just be aware that it starts with yourself. So if we want others to be less angry, then we should know what it's like to be less angry. If we want others to be less ignorant, then we should practice what it's like to be less ignorant. If we want others to be less greedy, then we should practice being less greedy. That's where it starts. So, with that, I'll pause. For me, I really, as always, just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with. We'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for that. And for those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. I just noticed the screen is slightly shifted, so maybe if I sit with my head like this, it'll even it out a little bit. But there's a chat box on your screen. As you know, feel free to chime in with any thoughts or questions, and I'll do my best to respond online as well. So we'll open up to thoughts or questions. Yeah.
You mentioned you've done a blessing for the parade today. I'd love to hear what a little bit of that sounds like to me from a Buddhist blessing.
Yeah. So this morning, and as I referenced at the beginning, and for most of you know, if anyone doesn't know, the Pride Parade is this morning. And brief context, 5 years ago, there were four of us that did a blessing prior to the parade like we did today. The 2018 parade was really cool because it was the first time that they had a group of interfaith religious leaders come together and walk together. Very often you have the different religious folks with their own, communities, churches, congregations, temples, but this was bringing all the leaders together. And so it was the first time ever, to my knowledge, that was being shared, that interfaith group led the parade to kind of kick it off. After the bikers, of course. The bikers went first,
Yes.
and then we all went, right? All respect to the bikers. But prior to that, we would we came together, just 4 of us, and that was again today. This morning there were 3 of us, and it was I forget her exact title, but a reverend from, I think in the Episcopal tradition. This is a Jewish Buddhist trying to reference Episcopal stuff, so give me some slack here. And my understanding, and her name is Susan Brown, I believe. Wonderfully, I just met her today, but she oversees, I think she said 42 of the churches. So that's what I said. Wow, I said it's hard enough overseeing one little Dharma Bum temple. Can't imagine overseeing 42 churches. So she did a blessing from her tradition, right? And then the other one today was Rabbi Yael. She's with I forget the name of the congregation. They practice out up at the JCC in La Jolla. And she did a beautiful blessing, from the Jewish tradition, which being a good Jew spoke to my heart as well. And then for me, I did, my blessing from the Buddhist lens, and to paraphrase it, because I had it scripted, but to paraphrase it, it was a blessing very specifically from the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, who Kuan Yin in the middle here. Her name literally means "hear of the world's cries," so she hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. And so my blessing was that may the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin send all of her blessing and compassion to the LGBTQ community that has suffered so much, been oppressed so much, shut down so much, and the beauty of all of us coming together to celebrate. And may we all travel safely and continue to. The theme was for this year's parade was Thrive, and so may we continue to thrive with open hearts and open minds as we go through our day and our lives. Yeah. So really special, really beautiful. And as I said to Carlos, when I got there, I was in my traditional black Hai Ching robe. And then like last time and every time I've done it, I've had some color on me, whether it was a little heart, rainbow heart or something. And I had nothing. I was in all black, right? In fact, walking through, people were probably looking at me like, who's the guy in all black? And so I looked over here, and she was 80 to 90 years old, and I was looking for basically something I could put on me, right? So I didn't just be the guy in all black. And I saw this woman, and she was actually pointing at us, but I was just looking for something to wear. And so I walked over to her, and she said, "I'm a retired reverend." And then she kind of told me a little bit about who she was. So we all went over, we met her, and I said, "Can I borrow for the blessing?" Because Channel 8 News was there, they filmed it, so, be on TV and all that stuff. I said, "Can I wear this for the blessing?" So it's really cool. This woman who I've never seen before, I'm pretty sure we'll never see again. In fact, she might not even be real. I don't know. We did take a photo, so if the photo comes back, then we'll see if she's real. Maybe it's just me and nobody. But then in the ceremonial way, I bowed my head to her and she took it off, and it was like a robe, but long. And rainbow colors, everything. And so then I put my head down and she put it on me. And then I went over and we did the blessing. And then when we were done, I went back and I put it on her. And it was this really cool, the blessing was cool. But in many ways, that interaction with her was for me, it was super special. So yeah, really, really quick. The entire thing probably went quicker than I'm taking to explain it. But yeah. And I think for me personally, really just incredibly, honored, humbled. I know a few years ago, walking with the rabbi that I grew up in, Rabbi Marty Lawson, who's been a dear friend and mentor to me over the years, from Temple Emmanuel, who just received the award from San Diego Pride this year. But early on in the 80s, the Temple Emmanuel, they didn't walk, they didn't represent, and they were not okay with representing and being represented at Pride. And then I think Rabbi DeBoer said it was 1987 that Marty brought to the board, Rabbi Marty Lawson brought to the board that they wanted to have a presence at Pride. And she shared how there was at least one board member who resigned. A lot of people were against it, but they voted on it and it passed, and they walked in the parade every year ever since. And so he was there when the Light of cathedral Wednesday night. So for me as a kid growing up with him as a rabbi, and then now here I am, and we're both there kind of representing together was really special also. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks. What else? Thoughts, questions?
How do you say Avalokiteshvara the same as?
Yes. Yes. So the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, or either you'll often hear it with a K or a G, Kuan Yin or Guan Yin, is typically a Mandarin Chinese pronunciation. They say Guan Chi Yin Pusa, Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Avalokiteshvara, you'll hear more in the Tibetan form. That one right there, the second tanka, that's also your Chen Rezig, is another way of saying Kuan Yin. Avalokiteshvara, Chen Rezig, Kanon is Japanese, Quan Am is Vietnamese. So you hear the same Bodhisattva, which those who don't know what Bodhisattva literally means enlightened being. Think of them as like angels, kind of in the Buddhist tradition. Just really cool people who did really cool stuff and really represent different practices within Buddhism, wisdom, compassion. So yeah, same.
Is Kuan Yin a historical individual, or is it? I thought it was more of a combination or combination.
So the question is Kuan Yin a historical figure? I mean, was the Buddha even real? You know, I spent a couple years, 20 plus years ago, asking the same question. You know what I eventually stopped doing? Asking that question. What I was taught ultimately, which is the second part of what you just said, many people didn't hear it, but that to me it's more about what they represent, the endless flow of compassion. Whether Kuan Yin Bodhisattva was a real historical figure or not, you know, is debatable. Many will say yes. And in the Tibetan tradition, the Dalai Lama, they specifically say is the literal rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin.
Dalai Lama.
Yeah. So they say that, like, so do you ever watch Avatar, the cartoon? However you have, it's like all the continuation. I saw the head nodded in the back. So the Dalai Lama says the literal reincarnation of initially the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Yeah. But it is the representation of what, it is the manifestation of who they are and what they represent that to me is most important.
Yeah.
Compassion.
The teaching.
Yes. Yeah. And so the Heart Sutra specifically where it talks about, I mean, it begins with when the Bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, was coursing in the deep Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom. So the Heart Sutra, in essence, is Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, expounding perfection of wisdom, which we're all so good at, having perfect wisdom. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Dalai Lama, when did they start looking for the successor? Just curious.
Come on, Tom. You've known me for years, and you know how much time I spend pondering that stuff? Only when you ask it. So, I don't know when.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
Yeah. A while ago.
It's a success.
Yeah. But, you know, for example, this Holiness Dalai Lama, this I think is the 14th Dalai Lama. So there were 13 prior. So you do the math. Times X amount of average years that each Dalai Lama lived. There's your answer. Yeah. What else? Thoughts, questions? Yeah.
What's the difference between Bodhisattva and Bodhikari? Is it enlightened?
Yeah, so the Bodhikari, the Bodhichari is it's within Buddhism, and it's funny because, and I may never use it again. That's actually the first time I ever put a title in there. People often just say, "What do we call you?" And I always, like the Reverend this morning, she said, "What do we call you?" Because she was going to introduce us initially, and I said, "Just Jeff." I'm not big on like titles and all that stuff. It's, but within Buddhism, there are obviously names. You have Rinpoche, you have Venerable, you have Zen priests, you have bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, the monks and nuns, you have bodhicharis, which really, that specifically comes from a Sri Lankan Buddhist tradition. So you have a variation of different titles based on ordinations and precepts and things like that you've taken. So that's one of my little things that I put in there. And the reason I'll probably never put it again, because now everybody keeps asking me what that means. And then the focus is on like the title of it. It's different from a bodhisattva. And really the important thing about a bodhisattva is not so much that like we're out there searching for, are you or are you not a bodhisattva? The beautiful teaching of the bodhisattva, or an enlightened being, is a bodhisattva or an enlightened being would never say, hey, guess what? I'm an enlightened being. That would be the first sign that they're not. Because an enlightened being wouldn't even have the recognition of being enlightened anyways. Because as soon as you were, in theory, an enlightened being, that would mean that you wouldn't see any separation between self and other. So as soon as you would say, I'm enlightened, that would give rise to the fact like, well, I am, but you're not. Therefore, you and I are very different. So an enlightened being wouldn't roam around being like, check me out, I'm a bodhisattva. The teaching of the bodhisattvas is really, it's a vow. That's, to me, what's important. And the vow of the bodhisattvas is to liberate all sentient beings from suffering, life after life. Meaning you are vowing to be reborn, life after life after life, to help all beings with their suffering. And that's your only purpose. And that's a vow. So I like to look at it as bodhisattva is like an aspiration, a practice, a way of life, something that you aspire towards, as opposed to being like something that you are. Say again?
Like an archetype.
Sure. And I was just going to say, to me, one of to bring the reference to different religious figures is very often you'll hear Buddhist scholars, Buddhist teachers talk about Jesus as a bodhisattva. That the role of Jesus, which came 500 years after the Buddha. So when people say, like, what did the Buddha think about Jesus? Nothing, because he wasn't alive yet. So it wasn't much of a conversation. But post-Jesus, the teaching often, or what's shared, is that Buddhists see Jesus as a fully enlightened bodhisattva who literally came into the world to help all be free from suffering. And I think that that's a beautiful teaching. Because the teachings of Jesus are beautiful. Like the actual teachings, whatever they are. What people do with those teachings is a whole different story. No different than Buddhism. Very often people are new to Buddhism, think that like Buddhism is free from all the baggage. There's as much messed up stuff in people in Buddhism as there is in every other religion. No offense to every other religion, but people often want to put down other religions and they put Buddhism on a pedestal. I could give talks for hours about all the screwed up things Buddhists and Buddhist places and Buddhist people and Buddhist whatever have done. So there's that as well. Yeah. What else? Thoughts? Questions? Yeah.
You've heard the term before enlightenment, chocolate carry water, after enlightenment, chocolate carry water. Is that right? From practices teaching, or is that a westernized thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's so the question was the term before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And your question is that a specific Buddhist teaching, or is that a westernized thing? First off, everything you will ever encounter in Buddhism, whether you hear it, read it, or think it, is only a westernized thing. Because it's all been translated for you. So everything, every book, every talk, everything you are learning is through a Western lens. And there's a whole lineage of 2,000 plus years of translators. There's a whole lineage of translators for over 2,000 years that, and some more famous than others, that have taken the teachings that were initially spoken and originally written down in Pali, Sanskrit, then 500-600 years later they get into Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and then eventually, end up in English. So all of those have been westernized for us. Again, where that teaching comes from is irrelevant, but what that teaching is important. In that before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, after enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Meaning that whether you're enlightened or not, it doesn't change what you do. So it's not like in Buddhism there's this awakening, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm enlightened, peace out, yo. Right? You just remain in with the people, or the animals, or whatever realm you're in. Right? Nothing changes. You don't then get a label of like, I'm the enlightened one, back off, please give me space. So that's really the essence and meaning behind that teaching, is nothing changes. Another very common kind of, you hear this in Zen a lot, specifically, is that before Zen practice, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. During Zen practice, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers are no longer rivers. After Zen practice, mountains are once again mountains and rivers are once again rivers. And what in essence this means is the mountains and rivers are there. Very often for people who are kind of dabbling in Buddhism, you read about emptiness and you read about everything being an illusion, and you think that maybe that stuff's not there or it's not real. It's there. It's just completely different from how you perceive it to be. If you jump into a river and you can't swim, all the emptiness teachings in the world are not going to stop you from drowning. Right? If you're on the top of a mountain and you can't fly, don't jump. But in the middle of understanding the emptiness of mountains and rivers, you see that they're completely different from how we perceive them to be. Where they come from, the purpose they serve, what they are, what they do. We are only seeing it through our unenlightened, ignorant view. But there's so much more than that. But then after that, you come back to the fact that you respect the mountains and the rivers for what they are. And you understand your ignorant view towards them. And oh, by the way, the mountains and rivers are just metaphors for every person, place, and thing you ever encounter in your entire life. That when we see people, and we see places, and we see things, we're stuck in our view of what that person, place, or thing is. What else?
Just like the phrase "Thich Nhat Hanh" says about nirvana's absence of use.
Yes.
So, getting back to the chopping wood and carrying water, I think the service work that I do feels very much like that. It's literally chopping things and watering things.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's a meditative experience. Probably easier to calm my mind doing that than sitting in the chair by myself.
Definitely.
And those are the things I feel more drawn to. And things that my ego would have judged as menial, my practice is this is exactly where I want to be. I mean, out of all the choices we had
Yeah.
to be, this is where we chose to be.
Yeah.
didn't hear any outside noise during the meditation. Maybe I was asleep. But
No, it was pretty quiet over here.
It
Yeah.
was quiet?
I mean, we're still a few blocks away, so you know,
Oh, okay.
it's not
So
too.
I thought maybe I had
Even New Year's here, I don't even know when it's midnight anymore. I got it because everybody's asleep next door by 10 o'clock, you know. So, yeah, it's and I think it's really the meditation practice. It's important to understand that it's not just the sitting and breathing. That it is everything we're doing in our lives. So, what else in our lives are we bringing a level of concentration, a level of awareness, a level of enjoyment? Like, are the heart and mind at peace and one with what you're doing? And that is a meditative practice. Very much, you know, Karate Kid, wax on, wax off.
The word I use is I feel very present to what I'm doing in the moment, and then I ask, what's next?
Yeah.
I don't have to, I mean, to think what's next.
Yeah.
Just help me do this.
Yeah, it's great. And I, as you know, I'm honored and humbled that of all the exciting things out there, you two chose to be here.
Yeah, right.
So
Right. Well, seats were affordable.
they were, yeah. You got to move up today. What else? Thoughts, questions?
I have a long meandering thought.
Yeah,
So go with me for a
we're
second.
good.
Okay, so you call it, I can't pronounce it, but the separation of when we're done doing meditating, that it has nothing to do with the way we sit or how we hold our hands. What is the word for it?
You're talking about pratitya samupata, dependent origination?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of into ancient history and civilizations, and I recently read that in an old 8,000-year-old settlement in the Indus Valley, they found images of a god in the yoga pose. So made me think, well, maybe there is something to the pose, and
Yeah.
we see it in the iconography all the way through. And I just, in my thought, thinking, wow, okay, so I'm gonna keep trying this pose, even though my legs go to sleep, and my back hurts, because there's gotta be something there, but people have been doing it for thousands of years.
Right.
I know it's an offshoot of yogaism, which goes back to ancient
Yeah.
India, but I just wanted to get your thoughts
Yeah.
on that, because I see you in the pose.
Yeah.
Right?
You should know by now, don't listen to anything I say.
I know, but
So here's the
Come on,
thing.
man.
In the, you know, to me, it's a script just because I say the same thing, you know, for 15 years, is the reason I say the way you sit, the way you cross your legs, the way you hold your hands is not important, is because very often people think that that is the only way.
and they'll put more focus on that.
And they'll put more focus on that, correct. And they'll think that, and as we age, not you, of course, because you're ageless, but as we age, and as we try to force ourselves into these, you know, full lotus positions, and the ego's like, I'm gonna get there, and my back, I can't move, I can't feel it, but look, I'm sitting like this, right? As we do those things, we're fighting the ego, and in some ways it's counterproductive. Now, I'll come back to the other side in a minute. Another thing, and I see this all the time with, you know, especially downstairs when people are getting cushions or things like that. One of the hardest things that people have, especially Zen folks, and I'm one of those Zen people. Zen people are the worst, right? With this stuff. They're like sometimes the most attached Buddhists there are, because Zen is very rigid. There are 9 points to meditative posture taught by Dogen in the 12th century. Literally, to where one of them is where and how you're supposed to place your tongue. So in this teaching, the Zen practice, the Soto Zen school, they would say you would take the tip of your tongue. You can all do this with me right now just to see how ridiculous and beautiful it is. You take the tip of your tongue, you put it right where the teeth meet the gums, and then you would swallow once, and you would close your mouth. And you hold your tongue there. because that is supposed to reduce the flow of saliva, making it easier to focus on sensation of breath as we sit. You imagine there's a string gently pulling your head up, chin just tucked in slightly. Your hands, one would be on top of the other, the right, I think it is, on top of the left. Your thumbs would placed together as if you had a piece of paper. If you push too hard, paper crumbles. If you open up, paper falls. You place them right here, kind of at, what is this, your navel, they call that? Right there. Your arms, you would imagine you had like a tennis ball or an orange underneath them. Your eyes would be gazing slightly. So there are these very specific things. And in the Zen tradition, once you do that, and your feet, same thing, a full lotus crossed, one up, the other one up, right? And once you're in that position, you don't move. Wonderful if you can do all that. But what happens is, we get all these people who started in that tradition or think that if you're on a cushion, that means that like you're a better meditator. Sorry, folks. As we age, and I would say half the people I sit with, as soon as they got down on a cushion, they ain't getting back up, right? So as we age, the body just doesn't do that stuff anymore. So the reason I introduce it the way I do is I don't want people to think that you have to do that. Because ultimately, you could stand on your head if your mind is focused. Now, the flip side is there is beauty and brilliance and some very deep reasons that those postures are held, especially in yoga, which I'm not a yogi. But there are reasons that all of those are taught and held and practiced. So if it's which I know from you and the way, especially when you ask the question, if those things are of genuine interest to you, and you're really practicing them, which I believe you are, with the intention of wanting to practice them for the sake of practicing them, not for the sake of like, can I do it? If it's really, I want to embody that posture, to embody what that posture represents, there's absolute beauty to that. And I suggest you continue. You see the...
I do.
Yeah.
Because you can still have that calmness standing up in a chair, but in the back of my head, I kind of feel like there is something magical and beautiful about the lotus pose.
Yes.
That has been carried on for centuries and centuries.
Yes. Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. So the more yoga you do, the more stretching you do, the easier it'll be to sit there and not get stuck when you're trying to move. You know? Yeah, so you'll be good. Yeah, and I think also, again, for those who might be new, many of you know this, but with us being the Dharma Bum Temple, where we're not introducing just one lineage or specific way of practice, we're really coming from a place where we all have different practices and different ways of sitting and being present.
Different paths as long as we're getting.
Correct, absolutely. 84,000 paths, as the Buddha said, you know. Yeah. Anything else before we close? All right, so we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. Any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, super quick announcement. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm the Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. So we do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So every night we have different practices going on, different people from different traditions. We have a quite a large recovery sangha, so anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or anything for that matter, there's always something there going on. Other than that, yeah, just thanks for being here. Please go safely on your way out. Happy Pride. Really beautiful to be with you all today. So thanks for being here. And I did want to, since I'll read the closing that we all read together this morning that was written by Reverend Penny 5 years ago. The closing that we all said, together, the prayer this morning was, this morning we call upon the divine that dwells within each of us to fill us with love, to send us out with pride, rejoicing in the now that brings us together in this moment, persisting in our common quest for a more loving, more generous, and more peaceful world. Go now, blessing one another and blessing the earth upon which you stand and from which you are made. One common humanity, celebrating the glorious rainbow of faiths that continue to bring light and love and life to the world. And that was written by Reverend Penny Bridges 5 years ago. We all shared it again today. So thank you all.
Thank you.